Our third topic of the day is employee engagement. Employee engagement levels have been dramatically low for years. Research from Gallup shows that last year in the US, the annual employee engagement was 32%. Globally, it was even lower, namely 23%, and in France, it was just 7%. Employee engagement, however, is linked to people's intrinsic motivation. As Annette France puts it, engagement comes from within the employee. It's the emotional connection or commitment that an employee has to the organization that then causes the employee to want to put forth the additional effort to ensure that the organization and the brand succeed. This begs the question of how much an external third party, such as HR, can actually influence someone's intrinsic motivation. As HR professionals, we cannot look inside people's heads or feel what it is that makes their hearts beat faster. And thus, our next statement is, employee engagement is like trying to get a smoker to quit. If they don't really want to, it won't happen. Andreas, what do you vote?
I vote yes.
Teske, what do you vote?
I vote no.
Interesting. Andreas, would you like to expand on that?
Nelly, you said it's intrinsic, and if it's intrinsic, you cannot force it. And since it's intrinsic, people need to feel that they do not have the legal connection, which is in their employment contract, to the firm. They need to have the emotional connection. So we cannot force it, yet we can think about what we can do, what we should do, what we can propose to these employees, that they find what they're looking for. And if it's only, just to start with, that they get clear on what they're actually looking for in their job. Just think about people who are joining now firms in the early days, very young in their biological life, unexperienced. So sometimes it's also about, what can work provide to you in terms of fulfillment. For me, it's not a question about an employee being compliant. It's about if the employee is enthusiastic about the work he or she delivers every day. And I only get enthusiasm if I play the strings that stimulate intrinsic motivation.
Teske, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's not that black and white. And I totally agree. It's an intrinsic motivation from an individual person. And of course, I cannot click on a button and that's converted. So from that way, I understand the statement. But I think with having open conversations with your staff as a manager, ask questions. What do you need to be happy in the job you are doing at the moment? I think you can have impact on that intrinsic motivation. I think with having that impact, you are able to influence how employees engage with your company.
Yes, and I'd like to jump onto that for a second, because what about my individual responsibility as Nelly the employee, or as Andreas, or as you, Teske? Don't I have a responsibility to ask myself certain questions? For instance, what do I enjoy during my working day? What do I not enjoy? What actually makes my heart beat faster? Is that not my homework that I should be doing? Maybe pretty literally, at home, without my phone, without any distractions, with a piece of paper and a pen, like back in the day when I was in high school, because then we still had to do our homeworks with pens and papers. Is that not something that we should be doing first? Let's hear your thoughts on that, and I'll start with you this time, Teske.
Yeah, I totally agree there with you, Nelly. Of course, it's the own responsibility of the person to decide, am I still happy in the place I am, with the things I'm doing, with the purpose and the why of the company where I work for. So that's, of course, a really personal decision you make. But sometimes people got stuck. And I think that's where a manager comes in, because you notice in performance that that things are dropping. Maybe people don't come to any social events next to work, for example. And I think by observing what's going on, you can trigger that specific employee to think about these relevant questions again. So therefore, I think it's responsibility on both sides. And I think people who are happy and who are engaged with your company also deliver a higher performance. So I think it needs to be a topic on each board agenda of each HR professional and each manager to see how you can help your employees with that.
Andreas, over to you.
Thank you, Nelly. You said, isn't it some homework I have to do as an employee? I concur with this view, yet I would say you would feel at ease if you have studied psychology. But what if you had, for example, a diploma in finance or engineering? So what we should do as employers is that we provide the means that the employees, irrespective of their background, their maturity, and also independent of the manager, they, have opportunities that help them elevate themselves, reflect on these things. Then, of course, Teske said it, the manager is of greatest importance in that respect, because I believe the equation here is about, what do I want as an employee? What do I need as an employee? Second, the manager who needs to translate this also, what do I want from you? As your manager and then as a representative of the firm. And the third variable of the equation is then to get very transparent where there might be gaps and to address and provide answers to it. Because first is to understand, that's the basics, but then it's also to be very clear on, okay, this is something I'm happy to take forward and I'll do something about it, but also, this is something, it will not materialize. That's not the way because it's against our firm's policy, culture, whatever, but you need to give answers to it. I've never come across a situation, this is the good news and the hope for all managers who are struggling with employees who feel maybe dissatisfied whatsoever. I've never come across a situation where things got worse afterwards. It's, I believe, only where you just don't bring it up to the surface and you just don't articulate it, or if you articulate it, you do it improperly by using the right words, tone, or whatever. So ultimately, it's really about these three variables. Is the employee clear on what he or she wants, the manager, and is this being addressed professionally? And yes, nearly HR is here the provider of the tools, the processes, and actually also then ensuring that people are elevating themselves in their ability to deal with these issues. It doesn't happen automatically. You cannot expect it.
And yet, critics might say here that it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science to ask yourself the question, what do I enjoy? You do not need a psychology degree to be able to answer that question. It is, however, a question that perhaps takes a while before you can actually really answer it right. So it will take time, and it will take you being more conscious about what you're doing throughout your workday and what is giving you energy, what is perhaps not giving you energy. So again, putting myself in the shoes of these critics, they might also say, to how far does our responsibility go as an employer, right? To what extent is something our responsibility? Do we need to hold people's hands? And to what extent is it people's own responsibility? Perhaps that's a nice last one here in this debate. Teske, I start with you.
Well, I think it's also depending on the company you're working for. When you are with knowledge workers, then I think you really can expect some things of the employee themselves. But I totally agree with Andreas, which Andreas mentioned earlier. It's about having that meaningful conversation. So from all sides, everything needs to be on the table. We always say, please put the fish on the table, because if it's below or someone, everyone knows that there is something going on, but nobody talks about it. So I think with a meaningful conversation where you put the fish on the table, that's the only way forward. And there is a responsibility for the employee, him or herself as well.
Before we continue, Teske, I like the analogy here because I was thinking when you were talking about put the fish on the table. Yes, because if we keep it under the table and we don't do anything about it, it will actually start smelling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's our reasoning behind it. So, and then everyone has that smell, but no one talks about it.
That's gonna get really nasty. Yes. Andreas, any thoughts? Thank you.
Yeah, irrespective of psychological diplomas or not, the best advice I would give to managers in this situation that they try hard to listen and to understand first before they come up with judgment and solutions and so forth. That's one of the biggest mistakes all managers are confronted with, actually, because with the responsibility that goes along and other things that you have on your table to resolve, we get very quickly caught in this trap. So just to repeat, because this is something that is very important to me, it's super important to try to understand first before drawing conclusions or making any assessment. And then second, where are the limits? I would say the line is thin yet visible. Of course, we as a firm and our managers, we try to provide an environment to our employees where they can thrive, and you can only thrive and give maybe more than the 100%, where everything is just fantastic. But there are also some limits. As I said earlier about the remote work, there need to be some boundaries to protect employees. And then there's this line where an employee who is in distress has maybe some medical issues. This is not something we should get involved. And this is also where our management needs to be skilled enough to understand, okay, even if I'm so engaged with my employee and I try to help him resolve everything that he or she can thrive there are these limits, and then it's also necessary to recognize, okay, at this point, you better seek for professional medical advice. This can also be the case.
Yeah, and I think, and this comes back to what you said also about transparency, is that I think it's important to be transparent and to come back also to that fish on the table. If you at some point realize that there's no way that you're going to be able to cut the fish in such a way that is going to be satisfying for both parties, then you should also be transparent once again about the fact that despite both parties' best efforts, this might not be the way to go forward. And then it's about accepting the fact that maybe for the person working in the company, it's going to be better to look for opportunities outside the organization, because then that's what it is. You should then, I think, also be transparent about that, right?
Correct, yeah.
Correct. I think with all the debates we are having today, I think what my conclusion is for myself today is, with all those changing things at the moment, about the retirement we talked, about remote working, and now about employee engagement, I think we also expect quite a lot from our management at the moment. And I think there is a real important task for HR to really see how can we support those managers who are in the day-to-day operations and supporting them with all these new things coming across for them. Because I don't think that each manager can have a conversation with an employee about vitality, retirement. Are you still engaged? How do you reflect on that for yourself? So yeah, I think that should definitely be a topic for each HR professional in the current days.
Thank you, Teske, for that. Andreas, do you have a conclusion of today or any last thoughts that you would like to share?
I only wanted to say in a summary that these three topics are amongst the most dominant and most pressing topics employers are facing today in a world where with new technologies hitting the market soon, our capability to adapt to it rapidly is more important than ever before. So thank you very much for proposing these topics to us today.
Well, thank you both for joining me today for this episode of HR Debatable and for being such great participants in the various debates that we had today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to do so.
Thank you, Nelly.
It was a real pleasure for me too. So thank you. And Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's episode of HR Debatable. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know, please, if you agree with what we were saying, if you don't agree, if you have any thoughts on it, if you'd like to participate in a future debate, perhaps, do let us know. And then I will say, see you very soon for another episode of HR Debatable. Thank you and goodbye.